Hi, good morning. Thora and I are really going to do an overview of Axis 5. So Axis 5 is community-based protected areas and conservation governance. So not really a panel presentation, more of an overview. And we see this session and the session on Friday as being really key to Axis 5. So that's why we're co-chairing them. And we're sorry Jose Alwin isn't here to join us because he is the third Axis leader with us. So what we want to do is just take you through a few points, where I need my glasses, a few points of what the Axis 5 is about. And the original questions, we have them there, but last June we revised those questions, and it's the revised ones we're really interested in, not the original ones. So, what alternative strategies lie in Indigenous community-based conservation and protected areas approaches? And how can ICCAs support local and Indigenous ontologies, knowledge, and institutions of stewardship? So we see those questions as really being critical to what Axis 5 is about. Our focus then is on the broad theme of conservation governance, spanning the range from top-down, highly centralized approaches of the state to locally designed, community-led alternatives. And we have our key concepts there. So that exercise, many of you will be familiar with us working through those various steps. And what we really want to do over the next few days is to advance the agenda of Axis 5. I mean, CICADA overall, but we're quite focused on Axis 5. And a couple of the things that we're particularly keen to move on are the book proposals, and I will speak to those in just a few minutes. A lot of the work that we're doing in Axis 5 involves many of the regional projects, the research on the ground that we're involved in. And there's some interesting opportunities for case studies. And Stan Stevens will be speaking to us on Friday about maybe some opportunities for CICADA's work to have input to the volume he's working on, the IUCN Best Practice Protected Areas Guidelines series. There's also an opportunity for policy briefs. I don't think Colin mentioned those, but they will be an outcome of the conference. And I've given one example there. There was, in recent months, there's been a national advisory panel on marine protected area standards, panel recommendations, and there's a real opening for Axis 5 to contribute to some of the work in that area. There are other opportunities. We're in discussions with the ICE on possibly assisting in the development of an online, what Eli Enns is referring to as a solutions bundle. So many different things happening, but it would be good to really define where exactly we want to go with these outputs. And certainly over the next few days, that will be a key focus for Axis 5. I'm not going to spend time on this, just in the interest of time. These are some of the partnerships that, as our Axis, being involved in conservation governance, these are connections that we need to be nurturing, and we're doing that. Within Canada, there are many initiatives. I mean, one of the fantastic things that's happened in recent months that Faisal and Robin Roth and many at Guelph have been really leading, along with the Indigenous Circle of Experts, is an initiative to really support the development of Indigenous protected and conserved areas in Canada. And CICADA is a partner there. So a discussion around the work that will entail should happen over the next few days. The US, we will hear from Rebecca this morning's session. We'll hear more about what's happening, although that's a very broad international focus, but it is coming from US-based colleagues. In Australia, we have, through Dean and John, representation from mainland Australia and the Torres Strait Islanders, Hilda, Ray, Nick, and then New Zealand also represented in this morning's session. A couple of book proposals that we are working on. There's one that Thora, Jose, and I have been talking about for some time, but we really are trying to move this along. Tentatively titled Confronting Indigenous and Colonial Ontologies at the Land-Sea Interface. Really looking at drawing on the experiences of Indigenous groups from different international settings, offering insight into that land-sea interface, how Indigenous societies understand that space, and how state conceptions of jurisdiction, property, and boundary making have really distorted and fragmented that very important connection in terms of land-sea territories that many Indigenous groups hold as so important. So this book will really focus on that particular zone. There's a tendency to separate terrestrial protected areas from marine protected areas. There's a tendency to separate those in our thinking, and this book will really be about how Indigenous conceptions of that land-sea interface should be supported, and indeed what we can learn from that interconnection. And we have a number of chapters, people that have offered to contribute, and we are very much interested in hearing from those of you who see yourselves in that book. We would like to have conversations with you over the coming days. Another book that's kind of come together is a book on seaweed. It seems that there's a lot of international experience, and very different Indigenous groups have histories of seaweed gathering, seaweed harvesting, and we have very quickly the makings of another volume that we would like to advance. Some details of that here, but I won't delay just in the interest of time. But some chapters that we have, we're at the early stages of having conversations with possible contributors. Nancy Turner, I've been talking with. Many of you will know Nancy. She's an ethnobotanist from UVic, who's done a lot of work with seaweed. There are a couple of her former students that might be interested in contributing. There's some interesting work that's happened in Australia. We've got Dennis Foley as well, an Indigenous historian from Sydney who's interested in contributing. Scott Hayes, who works in Fiji, some of that work in Tonga. Then there's a young, I believe she's a master's student, Jamie Lee, working in Iceland on a particular seaweed harvesting custom. Maybe David Anderson's team, and we'll be hearing from David about some of the work that's happening in Scotland. And some of the work that I've been doing with some Irish colleagues as well may possibly be involved in that book. But if there's anyone else interested, if that sounds like something that you see yourselves in, please let us know. There were a couple of other proposals that we mentioned the last time. Maybe Thora is better placed to speak to progress in these areas.
Yeah, so one proposal is looking at indigenous forest landscapes, and here we are interested in looking how indigenous participation in especially forest management and governance is happening. So the proposal is to put together a project that brings indigenous people from Chile, Canada, and Sweden together, people who are living in ICCAs and who are working on forest management and forest governance. It's interesting because it allows us to link CICADA several axes together, not just our axis 5, but also axis 1, and on a theoretical, more conceptual basis, it's also an interesting project because we are looking for a new conceptual framework that could also include live projects or concepts like Buen Vivir that we talked about last year. So, oops. Okay, our colleague Jose Alvin, who is not be able to joining us, has a lot of experience in legal backgrounds, and he's pushing forward a new research project on legal frameworks for the protection of ICCAs, bringing here together several case studies from Australia, from Canada, from Norway, Northern Scandinavia, and from Chile. And the aim that we hope to pursue is to come forward with new arrangements and identifying current arrangements as well on the international and national legal framework that could help us to really give a sufficient and adequate support for ICCAs. And that's something also that we certainly will discuss on May 3rd when we are speaking about what legal protection should be put in place and what related policies should be put in place to really allow for an adequate and sufficient protection of indigenous protected areas. So we certainly will come back to that point on day 3 of our meeting. Okay, some points of discussion that may help us over the next days and maybe already when we will be breaking out in parallel session after we heard from the next 4 speakers here are some discussion points or guiding questions which I leave it for you to read through it, but it's mainly like how our access can support and enhance the work of CICADA, but also of the ICCA Consortium and partners. How we can enhance the work with ICE, and that's why we are here now. So it's a good opportunity to use these days to really discuss with each other and see how we can contribute to really advance the reconciliation partnership of ICE. Then is there an interest? There are some CICADA members who are already new to this meeting today, so if you feel that this access and our objectives really speak to you, please come and talk to us, to Monica, to myself, but also to other people who are part of our access. We are very happy and looking forward to not only new members, but also to get feedback, some things that we didn't address and you think that really should be part of this access. Please talk to us so we can include it and really broaden our access in terms of topics, in terms of important questions that needs to be addressed. Also, if you know about any events, future events, if you would like to host an event and you have an idea, again, please don't hesitate to just speak to us, Monica and myself and other people of our axis. We are super open to really bring on board new events for the next upcoming years. It's good, we have 6 years to come, so so don't hesitate to speak to us about this.